Oh, it's another Monday. College football, NFL, and half the country is mad and their team stinks. Terrible, worthless, bums. I quit. I give up on the season. It's over. I do enjoy reading those on Sunday evenings and Saturday evenings of all the fans who can no longer stomach it after 1 week and 2 weeks of college and NFL football. It is great. I myself, BJ, have fallen into those traps and those pits of despair. So that's why I find it comical at the level at which we ride the roller coaster each and every week. And our team is not, if I saw it once yesterday, Ben, I saw it 100 times. NFL fans, we're going 0-17. It's just book it. It's terrible. Can't beat anybody. But no, we'll get to that coming up here on the show. Falcons and Jags obviously off to a rough start. We'll also talk Georgia football. Brooks Austin joins us every Monday. Will join us here on the program as well. We'll get the latest there from Georgia after another dominating performance against UAB. Now they dive into SEC play with South Carolina coming up this weekend. Vanderbilt on the horizon, so you figure a couple more weeks of solid play out there as well. And in the final hour, we'll get to Matt Smith, SouthernPigskin.com. We'll talk SEC football with him. Also, what we did last week, really fun. We're going to continue it each and every Monday, the good, the bad, and the ugly from the weekend as well. So a lot to get to. But first, guys, let's start there in Athens, Georgia. Knew JT Daniels wasn't going to play on Saturday. Was it going to be Carson Beck? A lot of talk right up to the kickoff that it was going to be Stetson Bennett. It was, and Stetson Bennett, 10 of 22, 288 yards and 5 touchdowns. So when you throw a touchdown on essentially every other pass and average close to 30 yards a completion, I would say you played pretty well.
It was incredible. Stetson Bennett was absolutely incredible. And you mentioned those final stats, Kev. In the first half, he was 8 of 9 for 269 yards and 5 touchdowns. And that was a program record-tying 5 touchdowns, and he accomplished that in just 12 passes in just 2 quarters and 9 passes. So really incredible to see. Of course, 2 touchdown passes, 2 to Brock Bowers, 1 to Jermaine Burton, 1 to Arian Smith, 1 to Kenny McIntosh. So balanced. He even had a 20-yard run. He looked incredible. And I think, a lot of people listening remember Stetson's high school career. And I think for people around the country who see these numbers and see this production, you have to remember and realize or know that Stetson Bennett finished his career at Pierce County in the top 10 ever for career passing yards in the state of Georgia and top 10 for career touchdown passes. So one of the most productive passers high school football in the state of Georgia has ever seen. I thought last year had some really good moments. Think about the win over Auburn where he started and had the great touchdown pass and was efficient in that game. He was great. He was great, gave the team a spark, and did something we haven't seen, made history in Athens over the weekend with those 5 touchdown passes in the first half.
Georgia should really, really appreciate Stetson Bennett, not just for what he did this weekend, but what he was able to do for them in 2020. If Stetson Bennett is not on the roster for this Georgia Bulldog team, where would they have been in 2020? When you look at the fact that before the season, you had different guys vying to be the starting quarterback. They choose to move on to different things. JT Daniels he comes out of transfer portal. He's hurt, so Stetson had to step in. I understand this whole Carson Beck situation, Kevin and BJ, when obviously he would be the guy that you would think would get the start, but Stetson is clutch because he's always ready. Forget what Stetson Bennett did this weekend. They were going to win the game. UAB was overmatched. But Stetson Bennett went out there and kept you on schedule. That is what a backup quarterback is supposed to do. A backup quarterback is supposed to be better than a starter? No. A backup quarterback is supposed to go out there and look like a starter? Yes. And that's what Stetson did. And I think that when JT Daniels does come back, not because, the offense wasn't rhythm. Now, Georgia still is not running the football. Not because I don't think it's because they can't. I just think they don't have to right now. But yeah, Georgia, you should feel real good about a guy like Stetson Bennett because he never made any waves. He just go out there and do what he's asked to do. As you mentioned, BJ, I go back to my former teammate Ben Hartstock old adage. When you're 6'4", 6'5", you have to prove you cannot play. When you are 6 feet, you have to prove you can. And Stetson Bennett has proven that he can. Most people cannot step in and do what he's done at the university that he did it at. Most guys can step in and play, but with everything that Georgia has on the line this year, Stetson Bennett is keeping you ahead of schedule because, I don't think it's going to be any type of, nonsense coming out as far as like the quarterback situation. JT Daniels is the guy. But when you got a guy like Stetson Bennett, for which, if you need to bring in the closer, you bring him in. So I was very, very impressed with Stetson Bennett. I'm not asking him to be a world beater, but you threw 12 passes and for almost 300 yards. I don't care who you did that against. That is about as impressive as it get. And the man did it in 2 quarters. Shout out to the man, Stetson Bennett.
And Kevin, let me add this just real quick because you mentioned the passes, had 5 touchdown passes on 12 attempts. I did some research on the Sports Reference database, and I believe Stetson Bennett is the first quarterback this millennium, so since 2000, with 5 touchdown passes on 12 or fewer throws. So if you're looking for a modern parallel to what Stetson Bennett did on Saturday, it doesn't exist. Again, the first quarterback this millennium with 5 touchdown passes on 12 or fewer throws. If I did my research right there with the numbers, but Kevin, it was really remarkable.
Yeah, look, I tend to agree with Ben. I know people, not a lot, but some people said, is there quarterback contract? I mean, he looked really good. Again, would Stetson Bennett have been 10 of 12 for 288 versus Clemson? Not the way Clemson was playing defense in week 1. I mean, Georgia's defense playing tremendous as well. So, look, I think if had it been LSU or had it been Alabama, Auburn, whoever, I think JT Daniels probably plays. Stetson Bennett, a guy that's been around the program, knows the system, comes in, and as Ben said, it was ready to play. Steps right in, and you don't miss a beat. And I think played the type of game that you would expect Georgia to have against teams like UAB. Now, UAB is a solid team. Again, I put everything in perspective. UAB is a solid team. Are they going to go to a bowl game? Probably. Are they contending their conference? Probably. Should the number 2 team in the country beat them like a drum? Yes, they should. And that's what happened. And again, I think he looked spectacular. I don't think you're going to see a lot of performances like that in college football where you just come in and you're just on fire like that as well. Now, again, a lot of football left to play. We'll see. But to me, I think way too early to be saying there's any kind of controversy about this or that. I mean, JT Daniels has played 1 game. Georgia is 1-0. Stetson Bennett has played 1 game, and Georgia is 1-0. And they're against vastly different opponents. That being said, I think of that meme where the guy points to his head and like, Smart, you don't have to score a lot of points when you don't give up a lot of points. And so far, the Georgia defense has given up zilch in the end zone in 2 games. They gave up a field goal, and I believe the only points that UAB got were on a pick 6 late in the ball game. So that Georgia defense, my math is not great, is 1.5 points a game? Not too shabby.
Well, would it be 5 points a game? Was it 3 and 7, and that's 10 divided by 2?
Oh, no, but it's a pick 6 by UAB, so the defense didn't actually.
Okay, total, yeah.
I'm talking about the actual when the defense is on the field,
Gotcha.
They're giving up 3 points.
Here's my question for you, because you have the sense of perspective, and you're able to kind of balance out what's happening now versus what has happened over time. Are we looking at the foundational pieces of maybe a generational defense? And before people go, wait a second, it's too early. I agree it's too early, but you also have to appreciate that what they did in week 1 was about as good of a big game performance defensively as we've ever seen, right? I mean, DJ Uiagalelei, Clemson, the playmakers, Justin Ross, they get 3. I mean, you're talking about a defense that did it in the brightest spotlight against the best of the best outside of Alabama. I mean, do either of you think we could be looking at one of the best defenses we've seen in recent college football?
I think so, but BJ, I wouldn't give it so much credit. I don't think it would get started this year. Aren't we a couple of years removed from Georgia going like the whole year without giving up a rushing touchdown? So this was already in the making. But unfortunately, when you start talking about generational defense and offenses, you got to finish the job. Like, that's I always judge the best teams on were you the last team standing. I know I probably shouldn't do that, but I mean, and obviously, BJ, I'm talking about, how great those Miami defenses was. Well, they won a natty in 2001. When you think, listen, and I hate to compare it to it, but this is the easy way to do it. When you start talking about Bob Stoops, only freaking national championship, his defense was lights out, in that game. So for me, they got to finish the job, because when you're a generational, a potential generational defensive team like Georgia's doing, you got to finish it, because if not, it's going to be a lot of guys getting drafted, a lot of recognition. But unfortunately, do you run out of gas when you play that type of – because, see, you exert a lot of energy and your reputation's on the line. I don't want to give up a touch. It's like an NFL defense when a player got, he's 60 yards away from 2,000. I don't want to be the team that gives up the 60. So I think they got good as a shot as any, because a lot of those guys have played behind some really, really good players. And going into this season, they will talk, the front seven, the front seven, the front seven. Well, they've more than lived up to it. And dare I say that secondary, they look just as good.
Yeah, I think Georgia's looked very good. I think I agree with Ben. Could it be? Yes, but I hate crowning somebody something before they've gotten there. Again, we are at the beginning stages of a marathon of a season, obviously. So we're running the 26.2. We're at like mile 3 of that. I think you got a little ways to go to finish that deal. It looks very good against the team that's supposedly going to contend for a national championship like yourself. It was very good. Now, I think what separates them is, and they, I guess, answered that somewhat this week, is can they play up to that level week in and week out? You have South Carolina and Vanderbilt the next couple of weeks, and those certainly aren't going to be teams that are going to push you. I think because of their dynamic offense. I think if Vanderbilt scores more than 10, it would be a miracle that Vanderbilt scores more than 10. And I don't even know what the game plan is going to be. Probably doesn't matter. South Carolina, a team that, again, ran it down and kicked a field goal with no time left to beat East Carolina, a team that is struggling for offensive identity with Shane Beamer. Even though they are 2-0, they have a guy who wasn't expected to even suit up playing quarterback for them right now. How does that fare against? I think the next 2 weeks will be like, can you just put forth an effort that's championship worthy in a game where you probably could sit every single starter on the team and still win the football game? That's what I'm looking for when you talk about that Georgia defense when it comes to especially these next 2 games.
Yeah, I think that's fair, but I also want to take a second to appreciate what we saw on Saturday just overall, because, I've seen a lot of commentary that says, yeah, it's UAB and we're already talking about Florida or we're already talking about Auburn. And when you open up with a game like you had against Clemson, I appreciate that. But you look around college football, I mean, even for dominant teams, to have a performance like Georgia had on Saturday is really impressive. Notre Dame almost lost to Toledo. Cincinnati struggled. Alabama didn't look necessarily great against Mercer. Of course, Florida State looked terrible, got beat by Jacksonville State. So to play a team that is probably going to be a bowl team, like you said, Kevin, UAB was one of 5 teams in FBS college football to have a shutout in week 1, by the way. They had a shutout, I believe, against Jacksonville State in week 1. So this is a good team. To beat them 56-7, that's a sign of a great team, because we see a lot of teams, Ben, that can play up to the moment. Can you play? You always hear about the trap game or the letdown game. Didn't have your starting quarterback. Stetson was spectacular, and you absolutely dominated like you should. It was a really good performance and a good sign for Georgia.
Well, I think both teams did what they were supposed to do. Good is good until it go up against great. Like, UAB is a good school. But it's who you go up against. I mean, the difference between good and great is executing, and how you look executing. When you look at Georgia, that is the Kirby Smart effect. Nobody in that on that team can get comfortable. Kirby Smart said, you know why I don't feel pressure? Because I put it on my players. And they unleash it on the guys they play. That's what great teams do. My coach gonna say, I'm gonna put the pressure on them, and you're gonna feel the pressure that I put on them. Georgia is not playing down because it's UAB. UAB could have played the game of their life, and they would have got smoked. It would not have mattered on Saturday. That's a team that's used to being, that's almost there every year, compared to a team that's still trying to maintain, getting back to bowl games or in their conference. So yeah, Georgia did what you're supposed to do. Stetson stepped in and didn't miss a beat. That's what you're supposed to. And like I said, this Georgia defense, oh my freaking God! I mean, these dudes are out here making it look easy. And dare I say, by the time they play better competition, they're gonna have that confidence, because greatness mixed with confidence, that's a recipe for disaster for opposing teams.
We've got more to come here on 3 and Out. We'll talk more college football. The NFL is back in a big way. Speaking of recipes for disaster, we probably had one with Atlanta there on Sunday. We'll get to that and more when we return. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. NFL opening weekend. Not good if you're the Falcons and the Jags. Let's start there. Atlanta. Ben, I talked all last week. I said, listen, Arthur Smith, maybe he's the mad genius here. But you're a new system on a team that was not good a season ago. You're coming in, you lost Julio Jones. You have questions about your team. And your quarterback, left tackle, running back, several of your star wide receivers did not play at all in the preseason. Kyle Pitts played and caught one ball in one game for about 3 plays, and then he's out. And I said, okay, I think it might be a problem, but again, let's see how it looks in week 1. Well, week 1, they scored 6 points. None in the second half. 2 field goals. Are we rethinking the fact that maybe some of these guys maybe should have played? And I say this, there's several instances around the league of teams that took it light in preseason. Aaron Rodgers didn't play. I'm not saying it's the only reason, but 7 padded practices for the Green Bay Packers all preseason. Starters of significance did not play, and they got shellacked by the Saints. Falcons scored 6 points. 6. Cause for concern? Ben?
Yes, it's a huge cause for concern. This is why. Okay, Atlanta and Philly both had 2 brand new coaches, right? Couldn't tell Philly had a brand new coach. The problem started with Atlanta is when Arthur Smith be saying, "Hey man, listen, we know what we doing." No, Arthur, you ain't never been a head coach before. When you think you're gonna reinvent, the wheel when it comes to the NFL, you get embarrassed. Atlanta might be the worst red zone offense in the NFL because they was in the red zone a lot yesterday. A lot. Came away with 6 points. Kyle Pitts, I can't really tell how they're going to use him. Right? Can't really tell. Then, so you couldn't run the ball. Matty Ice running for his life.
Matt Ryan had 164 yards
Matty
passing.
Ice, in year 13, 14, he dove to get a first down. Matty Ice dove when he scrambled the first. That's how desperate he was to keep a drive going. And we ain't even got to the defense yet. But since we are on it, BJ and Kevin, let's talk about that. Pass rush, not there. Running game, stop the run, wasn't there. BJ, we talked about the secondary. Can't cover guys. Jalen Hurts was out there looking like a seasoned vet. They tried to throw the kitchen sink at him, couldn't get there on the blitz. Then he was getting to his check down. Deion Jones. Listen to me. I love Debo. But Debo was non-existent yesterday. So for me, it just goes back to overcoaching, wasting time. When you think you're smarter than everybody else, the NFL is a very, very humbling game. The Eagles beat the brakes off of Atlanta yesterday. That was not a game. I don't care about how the stats end up at the end of the game. Matty Ice will not make it a full season. You know how I know? Because he was diving for first downs. Matty Ice, one of the slowest he's not athletic running, trying to get outside the pocket. So for me, BJ, what I saw yesterday was a team that was overwhelmed, and that's how the first team looked. Basically, Arthur Smith said, if our starters get hurt and our second stringers got to get in, it would have been even worse. So for one, I know it's one game, and I know the Falcons gonna probably end up going to 16-1. That's what I told my mama. They're gonna go 16-1. That was ugly from the opening kickoff all day yesterday.
Well, they look really bad. And Kevin, to your question about starters or prominent players playing more in the preseason, maybe, but I think some of the concerns that we saw team-wide with Atlanta in the preseason, we saw in the regular season, an inability to throw the football, even with Matt Ryan in there. Really, really inconsistent play at best along the offensive line. You got beat up front, regularly, and you can't do much when you do that. A defense that doesn't make many big plays. And then you think about just the logistical organization of Atlanta. Listen to this stat. Listen to these comparisons. You had 136 passing yards. Okay. You had 124 rushing yards. Okay. You had 99 penalty yards. You almost had as many penalty yards as passing yards and rushing yards. That is very concerning. And I do think the passing game, when the offensive line improves, Matt Ryan's earned the benefit of the doubt. You're talking about Ridley and Gage and Pitts, and Kyle Pitts is going to find his way, and he's going to be a star. We all know that. But when you look at this defense, Is there confidence that it's going to take a major step forward and be a playmaking defense? We didn't see it on Sunday. When you look at this offensive line, is there confidence that you're going to move forward and be a solid group up front? Not based on what we saw on Sunday. So I think there is reason for concern. I know it's one game, and there's the old adage, right? You're never as good or as bad as you looked in your last game. I think there are some reasons for concern here for Atlanta. And Ben, you're right. Kevin, they got absolutely dominated.
And you got Tampa Bay coming up this weekend, so that's not any better. I think you look at a couple of things, and could it be rust from not playing a whole lot? I mean, outside of the crossover scrimmages, I don't know how much live action some of these guys were getting in preseason. But if you're going to tell me that not playing them was better than playing them at least a little bit, I mean, Matt Ryan completed 21 passes, 21 of 35 on the surface. You would say, okay, not a bad day throwing the football. 164 yards is bad. Your leading rusher was a former wide receiver in Cordell Patterson. Mike Davis, who you had the utmost confidence in, he's our bruiser back. He's the guy that's going to be our Derrick Henry, a smaller Derrick Henry, but our guy that's going to pound it and help us wear down defensive fronts. 49 yards rushing on 15 carries by rushing for the day. He was your worst running back in terms of yards per carry, your starting running back. Calvin Ridley, 5 catches for 51 yards. That was your leading receiver on the day. Didn't really go down the field. 10-yard average on some of those. I just look at it and say, look, where you rested guys, it seems to be none of the guys who didn't play had a great day in week number 1, and that kind of looked like preseason game number 3 to me. Is it going to be better against Tampa Bay? It might be, but I mean, that's the defending champs. I mean, you know, that's a whole nother set of issues, Ben. So, look, do I think this is indicative of the Falcons' offense? No, and I try to guard against the overreaction, but my kind of take all last week was if you're going to sit everybody, you can't come out and throw a clunker out there. And what happened? I get it. Philly's good on defense. I'm sorry, you have a former MVP that didn't even throw for 170 yards in a game in a league where you have multiple guys throwing for 4,000 and 5,000 yards a season, and 200 is kind of a bad day in the NFL if you throw for 200 yards. He threw for 164 and no touchdowns. That is as bad as it could possibly be if you're Atlanta. And that's, again, offensive line issues, whatever. I get it. 164 yards, unacceptable for a team that has Matt Ryan, Calvin Ridley, et cetera, et cetera. I think you have Jalen Mayfield, maybe a guy playing a new position. That didn't help when you're going up against one of the best D tackles in the league in game number 1. I know that's probably not going to get any easier as you go, but still one of the top D tackles. You threw a guy out there, never started at guard. Look, there's a number of things you can point out. None of them are good. And I just think if you had to go back and do it over again, maybe Arthur Smith would lie and not be truthful. I don't think he plays it the same way, Ben. And again, I know as a pro, you've said, look, I need a couple of plays. Mm-hmm. I mean, we talk about it in Major League Baseball. Freddie Freeman's like, I don't have to play every game, but I at least need 30, 35 hacks against real pitching to kind of get myself ready for the season. And Matt Ryan, and I get why you don't want to do it. He's your franchise quarterback. But took no live reps in a preseason game against somebody else not wearing a Falcons helmet to try to see, you know what, maybe this play, if we call it in this situation, not good because we can't block it. Nope, we're going to wait till we get out there in week 1 and see what happens. To me, I put that a little bit on rookie head coaching. I'm not in the fire Arthur Smith. I just think the way the preseason was handled, not good for a team trying to change their identity, change the way they play, and show everybody they don't suck. Coming out of a 4 or 5 win season. Not good.
Nick Sirianni, he protected his quarterback, and his quarterback is in his second year. You talk about Matty Ice throwing 35 passes. Guess who else threw 35? That would be Jalen Hurts. You said Matty Ice had 164 yards. Jalen Hurts had 264s. That's 100 million yards. The difference is Jalen Hurts had 3 touchdowns, 0 picks. Jalen Hurts has a running back, playing running back, not a receiver, playing running back. See, the thing about Arthur Smith is, listen, arrogance gets you beat. You got to understand that, look, you warranted no. Let me say it the right way. You handed the ball off to Derrick Henry enough to give you an opportunity to be the head coach in Atlanta.
That's smart football.
That is smart
football. I mean, if I had a linebacker playing running back, I'm going to
your top running back is all a 6'2", 6'3", and he's wearing number 84. I love the number, but he plays receiver. This is the thing. If you don't throw a receiver the ball, but you handing the ball off, you showing where his skill set is. But once again, just say Atlanta did play good on offense. Did you see the run defense for Atlanta? They could not stop the run all day long. So it is one game, but you don't get dramatically different from week 1 to week 2. You had 3. You went from having a whole offseason to prepare for the Eagles. Now you get 3 days to prepare for the Bucs. That's all you get. 3. That's it. Monday you watch tape. Tuesday you off. Wednesday the game plan. Thursday short yardage go. Thursday second and third long fourth. And on Friday you do a short yardage goal line. That's it. So last time I checked, JPP and Shaq Barrett, they coming. Those guys can rush. You still got Levante Davis.
They're probably licking their chops after watching that tape.
It's going to be a long season because Matty Ice is running for his life. That is not a recipe for success. But BJ, like I said, Arthur Smith, I know it's only one game, but Kyle Pitts had 4 catches for 31 yards, and now it's trying to go crazy. Oh, get off the field. So it is only one game. They can get better, but who gonna get better with the defense? Because that secondary, they look lost out there. And it was Jalen Reagor and freaking Devonta Smith out there running ragged on that young secondary.
Yeah, I understand that a lot of the frustration given the performance yesterday is on offense because, Kevin, like you said, you have an MVP. You have stars who are playmakers. You would like to think you have some guys you can believe in and trust along the offensive line, and you didn't score a touchdown. And in the red zone, you were terrible. So I understand the frustration there. But when I think about this team macro, my questions are largely what they've been the last couple of years, guys. This team had 1 sack on Sunday. This team had 3 pass deflections on Sunday. This team had 0 turnovers forced on Sunday. Even if we assume Matt Ryan and Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts get better, and that may be tough with the offensive line, are you making plays defensively? Like you've said a long time, Kevin, you don't have to be a top 10 unit, but you can't be a bottom 5 unit, and you got to make some plays, and we just did not see that yesterday.
We've got more to come as far as that goes. We'll talk more NFL Jaguars, the debut of Trevor Lawrence. People already looking at Urban Meyer saying, did he game plan appropriately for week number 1? We'll get to that. Brooks Austin will join us coming up at the top of next hour. We'll take 3 because of that when we return. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. We'll hear from Brooks Austin coming up in just a little bit. He'll join us top of next hour talking Georgia football from Dogs Daily on SI.com. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and take three right now here on 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Make sure our guy PJ had enough time to get us up and cooking. Take one. We asked it last week, so we might as well ask it again while it's still relevant. Will Georgia give up an offensive touchdown this week? Because they have yet to do it through the first 2 games. They have South Carolina upcoming this weekend.
Yeah, good question. And you reminded me in the opening segment, of course, that 7 from UAB, a pick 6. So you're talking about a defense that not only dominated Clemson in a way that I have not seen, but maintained it from week 1 to week 2. And I don't know how you attack Georgia. And at some point you're going to give up some big plays, but they control the line of scrimmage. The edge rushers, Nolan Smith, Adam Anderson, are kind of the perfect complement to Jordan Davis in the middle. You're experienced. You have great depth. We've seen guys make plays in the secondary. It's a complete defense. It's a balanced defense. You have some defenses where it's kind of a risk-reward defense, right? They give up big plays. They get some turnovers. They get some sacks. You have other defenses that are sort of bend but don't break. They'll give up 400 yards, but they will not give up 4 or 5 touchdowns. And I don't know the key to moving the football consistently or even getting a big play or 2 against Georgia. So talented, well coached, well positioned. At this point, and look, Kevin Harris is one of the best backs in the country. I know South Carolina hasn't been great offensively, but you look at their passing game, I don't think you expect much production there. They scored 20 against East Carolina. So at this point, until I see it, I'm going to say Georgia keeps people out of the end zone.
I'll go yes. I mean, I think sometimes when you start looking at how great a defense is, sometimes we understand that what if South Carolina gets a short field? What if if JT Daniels or Stetson Bennett plays, they fumble, and maybe South Carolina don't have to go as far. Sometimes, when you look at how great a defense is, you got to go back to each possession. Each possession is not going to be your best possession. South Carolina can come out with a pretty good possession, end up getting down the field or have a short field. That helps them get in the end zone. But what Georgia is doing, BJ, historically, I mean, it's up there with some of the greatest to ever do it, and it's a prideful thing for them. I mean, the identity of the team is definitely the entire team, but the way Kirby Smart played defense when he was there and how he looks at defense is definitely resonating throughout this entire defensive ball club. I just think that when you look at Georgia and what they bring to the table, that front 7 is about as dominant as it gets. Jordan Davis, I mean, the center got to have nightmares knowing that Jordan Davis is going to be over you every single play, which is going to eliminate you in the progression. But yeah, I do think they'll give up an offensive touchdown. It has less to do with how great they are and more to do with the pride of the team they play in. South Carolina, I don't think it's going to be much of a game, but I do think that offense is going to do all they can to get in the end zone, so I will go with yes.
I don't know. If it doesn't happen this week, I don't see Vanderbilt touching the end zone in 2 weeks. So going to be interesting to watch there. All right, take 2. This is a very interesting question. What is the criteria in your estimation for storming the field? Saw it this week. Arkansas beating Texas in a big game. We've also seen it with Kansas just winning a game in football. What's the criteria for storming the field?
It's tough to be consistent, right? Because we all can think about potential games or games in the past and say, yes, you win that game, you do it. And obviously you want everybody to be safe and you want to keep the, make sure everybody's safe. But when you see it and when you're a part of it, it's very special. I've been in a stadium, granted, this is back in grade school, but in 96, I was in Tallahassee, Florida State. Florida was number 1 in the country. Florida State was number 2. Florida State won a close game. The fans ran on the field, tore the goalpost down. And you think about this, you might go, oh, wow, they beat the number 1 team in the country. Yes, but Florida State had just won a national championship 3 years prior. So Florida State was a pretty big, national favorite. And you wonder if you kind of draw it to now. If Alabama plays LSU and LSU's number 1 and Alabama's number 3, do they rush the field? If Auburn beats Alabama in the Iron Bowl and they're at home, do they rush the field? I think it's circumstantial. I think it kind of depends on the hype. That 96 Florida State game, Danny Werfel and Warwick Dunn and Bowden and Spurrier, there was so much hype and buildup. It was one of the – I know we have a game of the century every year, Kevin, but it was one of those game of the century games, and I think the way the game finished, there was just such emotion that it happened. I think if Alabama were to rush the field, even in a situation where they're number 3, let's say, and LSU's number 1 or Texas A&M's number 1, I just think given that you've dominated college football in a way that's unparalleled, I think that would feel a little off base. But could I see LSU rushing the field if they beat Alabama, even though they won the national title 2 years ago? Yeah. Clemson kind of lets people on the field regardless of the situation. Ohio State, maybe in the right set of circumstances, but I think it depends on a lot of factors. But I could see it pretty much anywhere except Alabama right now.
This is about the fans. And we always talk about, how much the fans play a role in these games. Kevin, you talked about it, how, at certain places, if the fans get rocking, that's really, really an advantage for the home team. But sometimes you storm the field bigger than just the fact that you beat a big team. That's you letting frustration out. Some of these teams ain't really had nothing, to ride home. If you Arkansas, right? Arkansas is saying, look, we're bottom feeders in the freaking SEC West. Texas is about to be a newcomer, so let's welcome them to the SEC. We tired of thinking that we're not a good program because y'all basing our program on what goes on at LSU, Auburn, A&M, and freaking Alabama. That's ridiculous. So if you're talking about what constitutes, it's really depending on the fans. The fans are walking in the game saying, hey, we win today, I'm telling you right now. And think about this. If the fans start jumping on the field, you as a fan, you got to go out there. There is no, everybody's coming this way. So you ain't getting out. So I think sometimes it's just frustration. In our mind, in our late 30s, early 40s minds, right? We thinking that's ridiculous. Well, how old are we? Like, when's the last time we told our kids, turn that music down? It's happening. Our age is crept up on us, BJ. But the Yankees, they pop bottles at the playing game. We're like, that's embarrassing. No. You have to celebrate these moments. And if you're a fan, right? Because I look at it this way. If you're a fan, you go to school, you go to a school because hopefully they got a good football team. But isn't that a memory that lasts forever? Man, remember when we stormed the field? Most fans go to school, they ain't gonna get to storm no field. So BJ and Kevin, don't think Alabama is exempt. Okay? They ain't up there saying we don't do that here. Yeah, you do. You just ain't had a reason to do it because we beat up on everybody. But I know we're gonna talk about Florida, Alabama more during the week. If Florida beats Alabama and they storm the field, you know why they storm the field? Because McElwain coached there. Because Muschamp coached there. I'm saying that's stuff you had to live through those years. So sometimes
you storm the field because you beat number 1.
Listen, let me tell you something. If you don't think my senior year I was saying we the only team to beat LSU when they won the Natty, sometimes BJ you got to celebrate the small victories. Because you look back on and say you should have rushed the field, but yeah, it comes down to the fans. Whatever the fans decide, that's because it don't got to be no big rivalry.
I'd say 9 times out of 10 you beat number 1, it's fine. Or if you proverbially stink and you get a big victory, just go ahead. It's fine. I don't see a problem with it. I think it's kind of overplayed how much all the schools are like, we want to keep people off the field, and the SEC is like, we're going to find people for it. No, just come on. If done the right way, it's fine. Again, can you overdo it? Of course. And I think there is a level at which your program reaches where you say, okay, that's probably not something we should do every time you win a ball game. But for Arkansas, man, you get a piece of Texas like they did. Yeah, get your butts out there, man. Go ahead and have fun with it. That being said, we move on to take 3. BJ, this last one is just a wellness check on you, man. Like, Jacksonville, not good. Take 3, you okay, man? Jacksonville played poorly. You're a Florida State fan. That obviously was tough. Is that putting it nicely? Are you good?
Yeah, it was, it was a weekend, and the game on Saturday, I do want to say this because it's unfortunate framing from the standpoint of Jacksonville State because everything you see is, Florida State has a meltdown. Look, credit to Jacksonville State. They found a way to make the plays in the key moments. That finish was one of the great, just taking out who you're rooting for, that finish was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. So shout out to those Jacksonville State players and the coaches. But that was pretty inexplicable from a schematic standpoint. Florida State really struggled. The team you saw against Notre Dame was not in the stadium on Saturday, and that's the first loss ever to an FCS opponent. You're in a really bad spot. And I like the Jaguars. I kind of anticipated a little bit of a slow start just with all the newness. But my parents, my mom's a big Falcons fan, and I remember Saturday night she's talking to me going, yeah, Florida State, wow, but the Falcons will be better tomorrow. And when she said that, I'm thinking, oh boy. And then you come out and you don't score a touchdown. So yeah, rough in the Bennett family. That Saturday finish, I almost couldn't believe it. I was kind of speechless. I didn't know what to say. But then you couple that with the Jaguars getting blown out. It was something. Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
No. This is what this is, Kevin. I mean, this is karma. This is BJ's karma. You know why? Because listen, when Florida didn't make a bowl game, BJ was talking trash to me. You know who didn't make a bowl game next year? With Florida State. Then BJ's always bringing up to me what happened in the swamp when Georgia Southern played in the swamp. So it was just time. It ain't karma. It was just time.
So now forever and furthermore, Jacksonville State.
Now Florida State gonna go on a run, and I'm gonna have to quit this network because I can't deal with it.
We'll come back.
All of our teams now share a common bond.
Yeah, we got more to come. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Three and out here on this Monday. BJ, I did want to give you a chance before we have to step aside and talk to Brooks Austin, top of next hour, Dogs Daily. What about the Urban Meyer, Trevor Lawrence debut? I mean, Trevor Lawrence, 300 and plus yards, 3 touchdowns, but also 3 picks on the day.
Yeah, I think Jacksonville looked a little unorganized, and that's disappointing. Trevor throwing interceptions, that's going to happen. We've talked about it. Peyton Manning led the league in interceptions his rookie year, and a lot of that yardage came late when the game was already over. But I think Trevor Lawrence made some really nice throws. He's going to be fine. But you had 10 penalties, including a lot of penalties with like procedure and lining up and stuff like that is bad. I think if you're Urban Meyer, you clearly have some areas where you need to improve. But it's not so much. I know we're running out of time here, but not so much the picks, just some of the penalties that really look bad to me.
Yeah, got to get it cleaned up, obviously, heading into to week number 2. We'll come back. Brooks Austin going to join us top of hour number 2. We'll also look at the week that was or maybe wasn't, again, in the ACC. We'll look at the Sun Belt. Tough weekend at some spots for them as well. It's 3 and out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. We are streaming live, ESPNCoastal.com, also live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Love to hear from you on Twitter at Pigskin Radio. Great to be here on this Monday. College football, just another fantastic weekend that we are coming off of around the college football landscape. And joining us here to start hour two, as he does each and every Monday from Dogs Daily on SI.com. Brooks Austin joins us here on 3 and Out. Brooks, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well, gentlemen. How are we today?
Doing fantastic. It seems like every time I talk to you, I have to have you address some kind of perceived controversy. So I'll just start off with it there. Leading up to the game, a lot of folks said, when it was announced Stetson Bennett was going to get the start, everybody immediately went to, did Kirby disrespect Carson Beck, saying he was number two, and then you start the guy behind him over him. How do you read that situation? Was it a slight, and are people simply making too much of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to have an opinion about it, right, when you're not actually in the building. I would assume that Kirby Smart, because you don't get to this level of professional coaching or this profession in coaching without being a good people manager and without the ability to handle these types of situations in the proper manner. So going to Carson Beck and going to Stetson Bennett Thursday morning and saying, look, young man, this is what we're going to do. This is the decision we're making, and this is why. All you can assume is that Kirby handled that in the right way with Carson Beck to make him, absorb that information and take that information in the right way and in the right light. But he clearly made the right decision. I mean, that's clear as day, going after and seeing the results and the way it played out on Saturday. So the question about, whether or not you made Carson Beck upset, of course the young man is going to be upset. Was named the number 2 quarterback going out of camp or coming into camp, and then leaving camp was the backup quarterback. And one would presume when the starter goes down, the backup would play. But Stetson Bennett gave them the best opportunity to win that day. That is what Kirby Smart has made his program about. What gives me the best opportunity to win today? Not next year, not the year after that. What gives me the best opportunity to win today? I feel like Stetson Bennett was that best opportunity, and he was proven right Saturday afternoon.
And Brooks, talk about Stetson. I mean, the numbers incredible. It's like video game numbers. I mean, 5 passing touchdowns, tying a school record for a single game in the first half. Just talk about Stetson's performance and how impressive he looked.
Look, I don't want to demean Stetson's performance, but we got to take a second to talk about Todd Monken, guys. My Lord, those first 5 balls, I think Christian Gokel could have thrown. No, in all offense, Christian on that one. Okay, so those were some guys running wide open that entire first quarter. So tip your cap to the offensive coordinator as well. Now, but Stetson did play exceptionally well, right? Got them into the correct looks, had the offense clicking and had the offense running after an off season where he wasn't really taking reps with that first unit. This isn't a guy that was getting a bunch of work during the practice sessions, wasn't getting a bunch of work during the fall camp sessions. He got his first real live look at that first unit, from what we're told, Thursday afternoon at practice. I mean, that's how clicked in and ready to go this dude is as a veteran football player. So I think the most impressive thing to me was he was that ready to go after not getting a lot of reps throughout the offseason. And that just goes to tell you how special that young man is and how he's gone about his mental preparation, even though he didn't get a lot of the physical preparation. That shows a mature aspect and a mature way of going about handling your business as what was a third or maybe even fourth string player based off the rep share at practice, because during fall camp, it was JT gets the lion's share, Carson Beck gets some reps. Let's see what the freshman and Brock Vandegrift can get. And, hey, by the way, Stetson, get your work wearing and if you can. And then he goes out there and plays like he did to start that football game. That's very, very impressive for number 13.
And Brooks, regardless of how many more games Stetson Bennett plays throughout the course of this year, how was Georgia? Does Georgia really appreciate what Stetson has meant to this program? Because you go back, to last year, if Stetson Bennett isn't on this team, where is this Georgia team in 2020? And you talk about not having no reps and having to step in. I know he played exceptional, but the way Stetson Bennett has gone about his business, when he understands that, listen, man, I know I'm not the first choice. Sometimes I'm the only choice, but I don't make no waves. I don't create no controversy. I just go out there and play with my numbers called.
Yeah, I tweeted about it after the game. If Stetson Bennett buys another beer, meal, or an Uber ride in Athens, shame on everybody. The guy should be a made man, and when he gets done playing football, he ought to live 40 years selling the most insurance in the city of Athens. I mean, if that's what it comes to, which I don't know what it's going to be for Stetson. I don't foresee an NFL future, but whatever his future is, he should be very, very appreciated, not only by the fans, but the people around the program in general. I think the backlash that comes about when it comes to Stetson Bennett is about, a relation to not necessarily, I mean, the fans want to see the other guys, right? When I see my Twitter feed and my mentions, all it is, it's not a hatred towards Stetson or a disapproval towards number 13. It's more about, well, I want to see what Carson Beck is. I already know what Stetson Bennett is if we have to go to him on the road against Alabama. I don't know what Carson Beck's going to be like that in a situation. So I want to see Carson Beck. And that's where the anger comes from, and that's where the vitriol comes from. But I just hope, like you're saying, Ben, it's not directed towards Stetson. And I don't think it is. I think people know exactly what he is and appreciate him for what he's done at the University of Georgia. But, I mean, you can't say anything bad about the guy. Like you said, every time he steps in, it's like, all right, well, this is what I got to do. I'm just going to go be me. That's exactly what he does for however long he's into the game.
Brooks Austin, Dogs Daily on SI. And Brooks, we've now made it through 2 weeks, and Georgia's defense still hasn't given up a touchdown. I mean, South Carolina has struggled offensively. It's certainly Vanderbilt the week after that. I mean, at this level, can they keep that up? And certainly the next couple of weeks, might it be a few more weeks before they give up a touchdown?
Yeah, I was about to say, I think we get into October before they give up a score. It's not necessarily murderer's row on that schedule moving forward. Like you said, I mean, South Carolina, I don't foresee them putting up, points against this first unit, and maybe even moving the ball at all. That's the other thing that's impressed me. I mean, it's not like teams are sustaining drives and turning it over in the red zone. No. Most of these football teams are dying out on the vine at like midfield and then punting the football. So it is exceptional to watch this unit work. And I think the most impressive thing about Saturday was just how deep they are. I think I saw 32 players made a tackle or something like that, or at least assisted on a tackle. Not 32 players played. Come on, 32 players got a half of a tackle or an assist on a tackle. That's absurd. Just how deep they are, just how good they are, and how elite that upper level unit is. I mean, a guy like Channing Tindall's the number 3 linebacker on this roster, and outside of Alabama, I don't see a program in the country where Channing Tindall not only wouldn't be the starter, but wouldn't be one of the best players on their defensive unit. That's how sick and twistedly deep this Georgia defense is.
And Brooks, you talked about Todd Monken earlier. What about Dan Lanning and the job he's doing? What about his scheme? Obviously incredible talent, but what about his scheme kind of helps these guys and helps this team have the results we're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very complex, right? So that's one thing you need to know about, being a recruit or a prospect wanting to play at a school like Georgia. You got to be a really smart football player to play on that defense. It's really, really complex. But that complexity gives opposing quarterbacks a lot of issues. You see a lot of quarterbacks sticking to primary reads because they don't know what's going around or going on outside of their primary read because they're trying to focus on that guy with the defense moving all over the place. They do a bunch of pre and post snap movements. They're starting. The most important thing to me this year, though, is that they finally started to let this defense line get up the field. For the last 3 or 4 years under Kirby Smart and with Dan Lanning's hand into that defensive coordinating, they didn't really allow these guys to get upfield and get after the quarterback. It was more, hey, push the pocket, make sure the quarterback doesn't get outside the pocket because we're afraid of what can happen when these guys get outside of the pocket. Well, now they're just like, nah, screw that. Go get him. Go try to sack him. And if he gets out of the pocket, don't worry because Jordan Davis is still 360 pounds and can run almost 20 miles an hour. So we'll run that quarterback down even with our biggest guy. You saw that this weekend. And, it's 3rd and 10. And Jordan Davis is running that quarterback down out of bounds, forcing a 4th and 1. So they're not really worried about it as much anymore because they've realized, okay, wow, guys, we've got good team speed. So even if these guys do slip out of the pocket, we're going to run him down. He's not going to run for 20 yards. And our defensive backfield's good enough to where we're not really worried about big explosives happening either in that back end.
Brooks, even sticking with Coach Lanning, when you think about the fact that he had to adjust his scheme from when he first got the D coordinator job till now, how much about that defense now is you talk about having that football IQ, you got to be smart. I see just instincts out there. You talk about a guy like in Jordan Davis, who's one of the biggest men in college football with the type of skill set he has. But when you understand what you're supposed to be doing, when you understand what everybody else is supposed to be doing, how much could you just go out there and play free and then let your instincts take over?
Yeah, the term, and you know this, Ben, as well as I do, play fast, right? They want to play fast. They want to play fast, and they want to play physical. And that's the advantage of having older guys, right? That roster, especially defensively, is really, really experienced, and guys that have been in this system for 2, 3, 4 years now. Especially when you talk like guys like Jordan Davis, and when your leader of your program defensively is Nakobe Dean, and this is his third year in this defense, and it wasn't like his freshman year he wasn't playing. He got a lot of run, especially on third down his freshman year back in 2019. Lewis Seen getting into his second year. Chris Smith into his second full season of starting, and you see the confidence and the swagger that he's playing with now, right? And even a guy like Darian Kendrick, first year in the system, but guess what? I mean, he comes from a Clemson system, guys, where Venables, you can't be done playing in that system either. So these are smart, athletic, freakish football players that are really, really comfortable with what they're running right now. And they're playing really, really fast and physical and confident.
On SI, joining us here on 3 and Out. And Brooks, South Carolina this weekend. We see it all around college football where, Notre Dame looked pretty good in week 1, had a scare against Toledo. We know about the South Carolina story from a couple of years ago. How does Georgia avoid what has been a red hot start, having that kind of not sleepwalk game, but a game that might end up being closer than you want it to be just because you're just, again, that much more talented and maybe don't bring the full energy? Is that a possibility, or is this team kind of turned the corner in that kind of stuff?
I think as we're talking about an older, experienced football team, right? As you return 17 juniors from a year ago, guys who came back with one dream and one mentality and one aspect and one goal, right? It's to win a national title. They know that they cannot afford a slip up. They slip up once to a team like South Carolina, and it ruins everything that guys like Adam Anderson, Jordan Davis, Jamari Salyer, even JT Daniels had an opportunity to go pro last year. These guys came back with one rule and one term, right? Unfinished business. And they're going about finishing that business day in and day out. It's not something that a mature and experienced football team allows. I think that's what happened back in 2019, right? You had a football team that just kind of was going through the motions midway through the season. I don't foresee this experienced upper class unit allowing these young guys to just walk in and say, hey, look, we're 31-point favorites against South Carolina at home. This should be a cakewalk. No, it's a night game in Sanford Stadium. There's going to be juice. There's going to be energy still around this football game. And you would imagine that they come out and handle their business like they did this past weekend against UAB.
Brooks, finally, coaches always want more. They're always looking for areas to improve. Where can Georgia still get better?
That run game was porous. Even against UAB, they got manhandled up front, guys. There was a few blown assignments, but I saw double teams that were stagnant at the line of scrimmage. As unacceptable. Unacceptable when you have a defensive tackle that is from a mid-major program that is holding 2 of your 4-star and 5-star linemen at the line of scrimmage and allowing their linebackers to run free. They have got to figure out how to reset the line of scrimmage offensively, or they won't have a run game moving forward. If UAB can hold them up, and I know UAB's got a big front, that's what they do. They teach exactly what Georgia does in the terms of run fits are vital at UAB. But that offensive line performance and that run game performance against UAB, that moving forward has got to get better. I'm sure they'll handle that and address that this week.
Brooks Austin, Dogs Daily on SI, joining us here on 3 and Out. Brooks, always a pleasure. We'll talk next week.
Yeah, we'll see you Monday, guys.
Appreciate it. Brooks Austin joining us here on 3 and Out as Georgia beats UAB. They've got South Carolina in the SEC opener coming up on Saturday night. We've got more to come here. 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. College football coming out of another big weekend. Here every Monday on the show, we'll talk ACC, Sunbelt, SEC, and of course, we'll hit the good, the bad, and the ugly top of the final hour of what went down in the college football weekend. But the ACC had a horrid opening weekend, BJ and Ben. Week 2, well, better if only by slightly, but still not saying much. What is going on there with the league, BJ and Ben? I mean, you have Pitt taking down Tennessee. That was probably the highlight of the weekend, but still, Florida State loses to FCS Jacksonville State. Miami has to score late to beat App State. NC State lays an egg. In Mississippi State, where's the read here? Why can't this team, why can't this conference, which should be better than it shows week to week, struggle so much?
Yeah, it's been really bad. It's been really disappointing. And we talked about the Florida State loss. I mean, the finish of that game where you're playing, I guess, a traditional defense as opposed to a prevent defense on 4th and 10 with like 7 or 8 seconds left was inexplicable. Absolutely inexplicable. And, you know, for that game to finish the way I haven't seen many finishes like that. And just lining up defensively, it doesn't make sense. But Florida State also got beat in that game beyond just that play. I mean, Florida State only had 329 yards of total offense. They were 4 of 14 on third downs. They averaged 3.9 yards per pass attempt. I mean, no big plays. Couldn't convert a couple of 3rd and 4th and shorts. So, yeah, that's obviously a completely, you know, different situation with the work Florida State has to do. But you mentioned NC State. To me, that was kind of the surprise of the weekend. And I still think NC State is a really, really talented team. Folks will remember I was very high on them during the preseason. And I felt like entering this weekend, they were probably, you know, the 3rd or 4th, maybe 5th, you know, one of the best teams, a Mississippi State team that got dominated for stretches of their opener against Louisiana Tech. And Louisiana Tech scored, 35 in that game or something like that? And NC State scores 10 against Mississippi State. And again, just offensively, 32 yards rushing, 3 turnovers, 6 of 20 on third down. To me, that NC State game was a real surprise in terms of the Wolfpack not being able to be more effective against Mississippi State.
Obviously, the ACC is going to be judged off, you know, what it didn't do compared to what it did do. I mean, you got a bunch of teams that had some bounce-back victories. I mean, North Carolina with a big bounce-back victory. I mean, Clemson obviously was going to have his way with South Carolina State. I think the Mississippi State, North Carolina, NC State was a little, you know, mind-boggling. But, I mean, I think sometimes we forget that, you know, Coach Leach is under a lot of different, a lot more pressure, you know, the Coach Dorn. So I think that's kind of why they went the way they did. App State is a good team. So the situation with Miami, I mean, people were kind of shocked, but that's us not giving enough credit to App State and giving too much credit to Miami. Miami came out with the, you know, with the win, you know, at the end of the day. Pitt and, Tennessee, me and Kevin was talking about this last week, BJ. I mean, Pitt is always going to bring a defense. Pitt, and that's what we don't get. Certain teams are known for certain things. Pitt plays great defense. Tennessee wants to run the football. Pitt wanted to make it one-dimensional, and it worked in their favor. And look, the Jacksonville State, Florida State situation is always going to be a head-scratcher. That is bad for Florida State, but also good for Florida State because that means that the expectation in Tallahassee is still big. You shouldn't lose to Jacksonville State. And the thing is, it's how you lost, not that you lost. I know it's who you lost to, too, but that lack of effort at the end of the game. Coach Norvell, I mean, the thing he said, talking about, I still feel good about this team and, our direction. Look, you're going to have to play better than that. But the ACC needs to start. The ACC needs to understand you're doing it for more than just you. You're doing it for you as well as the conference because that's how you get judged. Now, we give more scrutiny, Kevin and BJ, the teams that win because of how they won. Well, do they barely win? Well, a win is a win. And the Jacksonville State proved something that happens every single year. FBS and FC, it is not that different. I know we think, of course it is. No, it's not. I mean, Alabama lost to Louisiana Monroe at home, didn't they? That happened, right?
It's been a while.
I mean, it's been a while. I mean, we got to go back, but it has happened. So all I'm saying is sometimes you got to be reminded of, who you are and who you play for. We go because the most egregious thing didn't happen during the game. We're freaking Florida State and Jacksonville State. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but I think the ACC, Georgia Tech with a big bounce back because this time last week, we were saying Georgia Tech might be in trouble against Kennesaw State. So, celebrate the victories when you get them, but understand that just because, quote, lower level of football, that's just what we say. No, they lined up just like anybody else. But BJ, Jacksonville State has played Florida State very, very good in the recent few. I mean, as of late. So it's not like this is something that didn't go out. You didn't see this become as far as like losing the game, but maybe BJ, Florida State owes Willie Taggart an apology because they thought it was Willie. I don't even think it's Coach Norvell. It might be an identity crisis going on right now at Florida State because I don't care. You just don't give that up. Even if you in that defense, overcoming bad schemes happens every week. You got to overcome the coaching. But yes, the ACC, they got some big wins, but it wasn't that impressive because when Clemson loses week 1, panic mode was already at an all-time high. But they did get some bounce back this week, Kevin. I just think as a whole, it wasn't what you thought it was be, from the entire conference.
Well, I mean, again, I think the issue is going to be when's your opportunity to make a statement. In the coming weeks, maybe, but you're going to get into conference play. I think you're looking for somebody to step up and say that they can challenge Clemson and beat you. I think the problem that the league has run into is every time you think you've identified that team, they lose to not Clemson. At the same time, everybody, hey, North Carolina, that's going to be the team that can challenge Clemson. Week 1, lost, albeit on the road against a solid team in Virginia Tech, still lost. Okay, NC State looks pretty good. They have a solid squad. Are they ready to challenge? Nope. No, they're not. And, I think that is the problem that the league has run into is that whenever it looks like a team is in position to make a stride, they don't. Hey, you got the personnel, you've got the scheme, you've got things laid out that it looks like this is a team headed in the right direction, ready to take a step, and then you don't. And again, it's kind of wild to figure out because come draft time, they're still putting dudes in the NFL in plenty of numbers, yet on the field, out of conference, it has been a struggle for the ACC, especially the last couple of years.
And I think the team to watch, you mentioned, Ben, is Miami. Miami's 500, but they lost to Alabama. Everybody loses to Alabama. And I make this point because I always hear folks say, well, they got blown out. Okay, well, Texas A&M lost to Alabama by 28 last year, and they were the first team out of the college football playoff. They were a top 5 team. So just because you lose to Alabama by 28 or 30 or 27 doesn't mean you still can't be a very good team. And I thought Miami finding a way to win, and I've heard a lot of, well, Miami didn't look great. They didn't play their best, but finding a way to beat a good Appalachian State team, that matters. And to bounce back from a loss to Alabama that, was considerable, to find a way to get back up, play a good team, do whatever you have to do to win. You won the game, late field goal. Hey, sometimes you have to win it that way. And keep in mind, this is kind of a sandwich game for Miami. Open with Alabama, Michigan State coming up next. Appalachian State, you easily could have lost that game. You were trailing in the fourth quarter late. You found a way to win. I think this is still a good team with the Hurricanes. Don't forget about them just because they lost to Alabama and didn't blow out Appalachian State. I mean, we should know better by now. Beating Appalachian State is a good win. It's a quality win. So don't forget about the Canes.
I mean, I know we're gonna talk about the Sun Belt in a little bit, but we give these teams so much credit, and you know who I blame it on? These freaking preseason polls, man, they rank number 15. Are they? Or do we got to make sure we fill out a top 25? We know who number 1 is. We know who number 2, number 3, number 4 is. You start getting number 6 and 7, get a little because we really don't know how good teams are. App has been good for a long time. Miami has been to 1 ACC championship game. 1. But BJ, we still living in 2000, 2001, 2002. And unfortunately for me, that was a nightmare because I had to play those teams. But give credit. Sir, Jacksonville State says Florida State is our barometer every year if we plan them. App State said, look, man, we just as good as anybody out there. I mean, we can play with anybody. I mean, North Carolina State is a question mark right now. We don't know who they are. As Kevin say, they ACC'd themselves. They just happen to do it before they get into the ACC schedule. They already mid-season form. But look, give teams credit for getting wins. The hardest thing to do in football is to get the 6 wins. We don't. That's why 6 wins is it's what you have to do to make it to a bowl game. We take that stuff for granted because this team's gonna be good. But shout out to Miami because BJ, do you know what they would be saying to Mr. Coach Manny Diaz? They would have lost. Same thing they saying to Coach Norvell. Boy, you might want to rent your house. No, don't buy it because you ain't gonna be here long. Big brands get tested by brands that ain't as big, but they shout out to the Miami boys for getting that dub.
We've got much more to get to here on 3 and Out. We'll take a look at the Sun Belt when we come back. Another interesting weekend there. And in Statesboro, Chad Lunsford saying, look, Georgia Southern doesn't get beat like that after they got beat like that down in South Florida. We'll get to that when we come back. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. College football, another big weekend. Sun Belt had some opportunities to go out there. App State almost getting it done. Coastal Carolina this past week beating Kansas for the third year in a row, mind you. I don't know if that says more about Coastal or Kansas football at this point, but the Sun Belt again had some opportunities to go out and make statements. Georgia State got beat down by North Carolina. Georgia Southern did not play well at all against FAU. Matter of fact, I think scored just a touchdown early in the game, missed the extra point, and that was pretty much it from an offensive standpoint. Justin Tomlin set to come back this week against Arkansas. I don't know if J.D. King was going to play or not this week. Looks like Georgia Southern trying to make sure he's 100% before they bring him back. A chance, but maybe not against Arkansas this week. But BJ, Georgia Southern, a struggle there after, again, early in the game. Thought, okay, maybe this can be a little bit of back and forth, and then I just got away from him.
Yeah, disappointing performance overall. And you mentioned Tomlin coming back. I think that'll help. We'll see what he's able to do. Now, Arkansas, that's a tough test, probably much tougher than we thought at the beginning of the season. They had a huge win over Rice in week 1. And then, of course, really dominated Texas on that national stage over the weekend. But I do want to say this, Florida Atlantic's a good team. Coach Taggart has done a good job with this program. We saw them make some plays against Florida, and former Miami quarterback N'Kosi Perry looked great on Saturday against Georgia Southern, was 19 of 27 for 332 yards and 4 touchdowns. And I think, yes, when you get fully healthy, you want to be able to run the football. We'll see what Tomlin can do, with that, and also throwing the football. But I think defensively, you've got to do a better job in pass defense, and you expect to be a little more consistent there. Again, Perry was just incredibly efficient throwing the ball downfield against Georgia Southern. Big plays, 4 touchdowns. And I think you expect to be better defensively. You expect to be better in the defensive backfield. And look, you've had a disappointing start to the season. You were able to get the win against Gardner-Webb, but it was close. It was tight. FAU, a good team. Coach Taggart doing a good job. But you still expect to, at the very least, be competitive. That was disappointing, but I think you move forward. Hopefully you get healthy. We'll see what Tomlin can do, a veteran with some experience at quarterback. But, yes, that was a disappointing finish against FAU.
The number for Georgia Southern every week to win games is 200. I'm talking about 200 yards rushing. I think there was like 38 rushed, like 139 yards. Cam Ransom, I mean, he's an incredible talent. But the one thing about Georgia Southern that will never ever go away, and I know these are questions that always get deflected when you ask your Coach Lunsford, you're gonna have to develop in the passing game, because the thing about football is, okay, if they take away what I do best, can I do well at what I don't do well at, and that's throwing the football. Cam Ransom, the kid looks the part. But BJ and Kevin, what's going to happen if the run game got neutralized this weekend? The thing about a running team is you're not built to play from behind at all. And I think he went for like 3 touchdowns, BJ, in the third quarter. You broke the game open. What happens then? But I do know that Tomlin is going to add a spark. But unfortunately, you're going to get a very, very confident Arkansas team that just waxed Texas. I mean, this was not a game. I understand Coach Lunsford is under a different level of scrutiny when you're talking about how good they want to, the style of football they want to play. Georgia Southern, whenever you run the option, that is a stay ahead of schedule type offense. You can't be getting down. But yeah, it's been a tough couple of first 2 games for Georgia Southern, Kevin. It doesn't get any better. But listen, the Sun Belt, we talking about these out of conference games. I mean, the Sun Belt is rough enough on its own. You start talking about Arkansas, you start talking about FAU, and BYU is coming to town this year. So, yeah, Tomlin coming back, and hopefully she'll create a spark, and J.D. King is going to definitely create a spark for a running game that's just kind of lackluster right now.
Yeah, I think obviously the run game, your 2 leading rushers were both your quarterbacks. It was, Cam Ransom and Kennerson were your leading rushers on the ball game. And in an option offense, you would say, well, that's not bad. But you almost threw for more yards than you ran for against FAU. 14 of 24 throwing the football for Georgia Southern. That's not bad. That's fairly efficient. You didn't have a lot of yards off of it, 118, I believe. But 14 to 24, that's about where you want to live. Could not rush the ball, I think, consistently. And to me, BJ, I think the most disappointing part of this is you look at the final score, 38-6. It was 10-6 at halftime. I mean, you were in the ball game. and it just completely got away from you there in the third quarter, giving up 21 points. So you lost a fumble, you had an interception. Just not a great day, and you lost in a lot of metrics that would tell you were going to win the ball game. You were not great on third down, especially if you're a running team. Got to be good, at least solid on third down. Give yourself some fourth and shorts. You did win the penalty game, but it didn't seem to matter when you were late. You lost time of possession. That's never good for a Georgia Southern football team. So, yeah, you're trying to get it back this week against Arkansas, and maybe you catch Arkansas in a yay for us moment where, hey, we just beat Texas, and you have a chance to go in there. But, again, not a great offensive performance from Georgia Southern, and I don't know if this is a great week to figure that out, but certainly you got to find something that works here before you get into to Sun Belt play.
Yeah, and talented young quarterbacks on your roster, guys that have done a good job. But I think Tomlin, like you said, Ben, maybe add a spark, bring some veteran stability to the offense. But the schedule is, listen, BYU, obviously, they beat Utah over the weekend. Arkansas is probably one of the teams that has impressed the most in terms of where expectations were and what they've done a couple of weeks in. And Kevin, like you said, who knows, could be a trap game. I mean, Georgia Southern's capable of playing with anybody, a trap game for Arkansas, but you're still going to play a team that is red hot and just have one of their biggest wins in recent memory. But you look around the league even, I mean, Coastal Carolina, we know them as a team that, they throw the football with Grayson McCall and Isaiah Likely. Their running back, Reese White, had 100 yards and 3 touchdowns. So the balance offensively for Coastal Carolina, I mean, that's going to be a remarkable challenge. I do think you look at a team like South Alabama in the Sun Belt quietly, beat Southern Miss in week 1, beat Bowling Green on Saturday. It was close, but you're 2-0 with Kane Womack, the new head coach there in Mobile, Jake Bentley, former South Carolina quarterback there for the Jaguars. And, there aren't going to be any easy weeks in this league. I think Louisiana's been a little bit of a disappointment when you think about getting blown out by Texas the way they did. They had a really tight game with Nicholls State, the FCS team on Saturday, were able to win. But even some of these teams that have lost, I mean, Arkansas State on Saturday, they put up 50 points in a loss to Memphis. Former Florida State quarterback James Blackman had 4 touchdowns. Georgia Southern will play Troy later in the year. Troy played Liberty within 1 score and did a really good job against Malik Willis. So the Sun Belt, we saw what App State did against Miami. There are no off weeks, and the schedule is going to be really challenging for the Eagles.
Yeah, and let's give the Sun Belt a lot of credit. I mean, when you start talking about out-of-conference schedules, it's not like these guys be trying to go out there and get automatic wins. I mean, it's something to say for Miami. I mean, for App State to go out there and play Miami. It's something to say for Georgia Southern getting ready to play, Arkansas. So it's not like these guys are playing, Georgia State playing North Carolina. These guys are saying, look, when they say we have the adage of we'll play anybody, they will play anybody. So you give them a lot of credit for that. I mean, I know that the out of conference is supposed to get you ready for the in-conference schedule, but these guys are going up against some big-time heavy hitters, and maybe they just bringing out the best in some of these teams. I mean, so yeah, I do think Kevin, the Sun Belt, unlike the ACC, they earned their reputation of the Sun Belt is the fun belt. Just do not play them out of conference because you will be looking because aren't we a couple of years removed from Georgia State going to Tennessee and beating them? So. Yeah, the Sun Belt, I mean, they don't never, ever get the credit they deserve as far as like what they bring to the table, but it's not going to get any easier moving forward. And if you're Georgia Southern, you're going to need Tomlin to create more than just a spark because it's rough right now.
Yeah, we've got more to come here on 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. So I know we ran out of time last hour to just talk about Urban Meyer and Jacksonville. I know a lot of people said, look, disorganized, not a good debut for Urban as a coach in the National Football League. A lot of people saying, look, this might have been one of your better chances to get a dub early in the season against a Houston team that's not expected to be world beaters out there. Trevor Lawrence, 300 plus yards passing, 3 touchdowns, but also 3 costly picks. What do you kind of, again, make of the debut of Urban Meyer, Trevor Lawrence, and is there any optimism at this point moving forward?
I don't know that optimism is the right word because I don't think we're to that point yet, right? Like you go back a couple of months and people were saying, "Oh, Jacksonville's going to contend. You know, they're going to make the playoffs in year 1 with Meyer and Lawrence." And then, you know, you start to see things like the injuries. You know, Travis Etienne lost for the season. You look at, you know, some of the roster moves. You traded a couple of guys, Sidney Jones and Joe Schobert, 2 of your better, more experienced players on defense. You trade, and then you start to look and realize, wow, this team is really, really young. Like not kind of young, really young. When you talk about the star players, I mean, Trevor Lawrence is going to have to go through ups and downs. Ben, I know you've talked about this. That was his first loss ever, like officially in the regular season. Did not lose a regular season game in high school, did not lose a regular season game in college. That's his first kind of real regular season loss. He's going to have to find a way to bounce back. And he threw 3 touchdowns, and I think credit his resiliency. He had some great throws, also had some picks, also had some drops. You're young at wide receiver. You're young along the offensive line. Defensively, you're talking about guys like, you know, C.J. Henderson and Josh Allen and Caleb Von Chasen, guys that are in their first, second, or third year. It's going to take time. So is there optimism for the future? I would say absolutely. You have a very talented young roster. But Urban Meyer's got to prove himself at this level. And yes, it's 1 game. And yes, you started a rookie quarterback. But you looked a little out of sorts. You looked like at times out there wasn't great clarity. 10 penalties, as I mentioned earlier in the show. So should fans still be optimistic about Jacksonville's future? Yes. You have a lot of young talent. You have a franchise quarterback. But is it going to take some time? Absolutely. And I think we had a little bit of a reality check and kind of saw that in week 1 against the Texans.
This team won 1 game last year. 1 game, right? People be thinking that you got some type of like a magic potion. Oh, the magic potion is not Trevor Lawrence and it's not Urban Meyer. It's learning how to win in the National Football League on a consistent level. The problem with Jacksonville on Sunday was not the fact that they lost the game. I always look at one thing when I'm looking at quarterbacks. It's not the passing yards. It's not the touchdowns or picks. It's the pass attempts. Trevor Lawrence threw the ball 51 times. 51. You're not going to win throwing the ball 51 times. How you know that, Ben? How many times did Dak Prescott throw the ball on Thursday night? Over 50 times. Did they win? No. That's not efficient football. James Robinson didn't run the football well. You know, Carlos Hyde didn't run the football efficient enough. Laviska Shenault, you know, I mean, they had him trying to get the football. And the thing is, they couldn't get off the field. People see the Texas, Tyrod Taylor. The Texas, Tyrod Taylor. That's a veteran quarterback that's been in the league that understands how to win. Brandon Cooks. That's a name that's traveled around the league a little bit. He had like 132 receiving yards. A 1-15 team has to learn how to win. They have to learn how to get better from losing, and they have to learn how to win. Trevor Lawrence, sometimes we get caught up in the end result. He had 330-something. He had 3 touchdowns. He also had 3 picks. So it is just 1 game, and I know that everybody thought it's the Texans. They better get used to saying it's the Jaguars because it's going to take some time. And listen, that the AFC South did not look good all weekend. I mean, I know we ain't talking about the Titans today, but they got the hell beat out them too by Arizona, and they got Julio Jones. Didn't matter. I mean, and the Colts, they struggle. So I think when you start talking about this division, it is up for grabs. But BJ, 51 times for a rookie quarterback in his first career start is not good. His body will not hold up because it's not so much the sacks, it's the hits. He got hit a lot yesterday. So I credit him a lot for being a guy that's very tough. He's only missed the game because of, COVID, getting COVID last year, in 2020. But it's going to take a while for Urban Meyer to understand that your resume that got you to this point, it's over with. It's done with. Finito. You got to start from scratch. So, yeah, it is just 1 game. But if the Texas shows you anything, that a veteran quarterback against a rookie quarterback usually bodes well for the veteran.
And again, still a lot of football left for Urban Meyer. But as you said, your feature back 1,000-yard rusher had 5 attempts running the football yesterday. That's not dedication to trying to run the football. And as you said, 51 times a game for Trevor Lawrence. I said this about young Matt Ryan, BJ, if you remember. The Falcons threw the ball over 40 times with young Matt Ryan. They lost. I mean, it was almost a certainty. And you could say, well, they were losing. I understand that, but you realize you don't have to throw it so much before you're losing in the ball game. And I think that to me is the identity. You say, well, the game plan. Look, can't have Trevor Lawrence throwing it 50 times a game and expect to win. I agree with Ben. I think a young quarterback, limit the amount of big time decisions he's got to make throwing the football. You'll see those interception numbers come down, BJ, from 3 picks to hopefully, maybe 1 if you're still talking about his rookie season, and make some smarter decisions with the football. But yeah, just dropping back and slinging it with the offensive line, you've got not a good recipe for success. We've got a lot to get to in the final hour of the program. We'll get to the good, the bad, and the downright ugly from the college football weekend. We'll look at the weekend that was in the SEC. Also, Matt Smith, SouthernPigskin.com, will join us, and we'll talk some college football with him. It is 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network, streaming live, ESPNCoastal.com. Final hour of 3 and Out here on this Monday afternoon. Glad you were with us. Thanks for making us a part of your day. We're streaming live as well, espncoastal.com. You can also catch us live streaming on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Go to our YouTube channel at ESPN Coastal. Hit that subscribe button. You'll know every time 3 and Out is live, and you can catch us that way as well. We'll hear from Matt Smith here in the final hour of the program, talking college football. We'll talk some SEC football specifically coming up in just a little bit. But, guys, time for a segment we like to do here at this time every Monday, the good, the bad, and the ugly from the week that was, and there's plenty of all of that to get to. What was the good here from this past college football Saturday?
Yeah, I think you start with Oregon. I mean, for seasons now in college football, it's been, can the Pac-12 produce a contender? Can the Pac-12, win some games nationally? Can the Pac-12 grab some headlines? Oregon went to Ohio State, controlled that game, managed that game, and won that game in fairly convincing fashion. I mean, you're not going to go and blow out Ohio State, but in terms of kind of being the team that dictates tempo, Oregon won that game and I think won it convincingly. And Ben, you mentioned this earlier, Kayvon Thibodeau didn't even play. I mean, the guy for Oregon who might be the number 1 overall draft pick in 2022 didn't even play. Anthony Brown did a really nice job. You were able to run the football defensively. You gave up a lot of yards through the air, but in the red zone when it mattered, you made enough plays. I think you have to look at Oregon as one of the national contenders right now. When you talk about Alabama, when you talk about Georgia, I think it's then Oregon. When you say, hey, Oklahoma didn't look great in week 1 against Tulane. So give Oregon a ton of credit for going to Ohio State, winning that game the way they did. I also say Arkansas. Arkansas and Texas have a rivalry that dates back to the 1800s. Long stretches of that rivalry have been dominated by Texas. Hey, guess what, Texas? You're coming over to the SEC. Here's your unofficial welcome. You get beat down by Arkansas. Great atmosphere in Fayetteville. Great win for Sam Pittman. They run the football. That was a statement victory for Arkansas. And then, Ben, I'm going to talk about your quarterback, your backup quarterback at Florida, Anthony Richardson. More highlights on Saturday. Through 2 games now, and granted we're talking about limited reps, Anthony Richardson is averaging 17.5 yards per pass attempt, 32 yards per pass completion, and 25 yards per rush. This guy is a big play, a home run waiting to happen. So keep an eye on him. Florida, Alabama this weekend. How will Anthony Richardson be used?
The good for me is Stetson Bennett. And you can't say enough about him because of the circumstance. Yes, he was expected to go. Georgia's going to win the football game, but the fact that he got the offense on track and they still haven't found a way to run the football, the hardest thing to do is to come off the bench when you haven't gotten any reps. I don't care where it's at. Stetson Bennett understands. It's supposed to be, think about it. They didn't want him last year. They wanted Jamie Newman. They wanted JT. Hey, come in, Stetson. What's up? We need you to go out there and keep us afloat. JT Daniels comes back. I appreciate it, Stetson. Never to be seen from or heard from again. JT Daniels gets hurt again. Hey, Stetson. Hey, Carson. Well, tell Stetson to come here. Come here, man. I need you to come do it again. Through 12 passes. It's a 5 of them for touchdown, almost 300 yards. I'm sorry, against a UAB team that's going to be really, really good in their conference and competing, to go to bowl games. Stetson Bennett is underappreciated because of who he is, not what he is doing. 5 touchdowns and 5 touchdowns. And I know anybody, isn't it funny how people say anybody could have did it? No, anybody couldn't have done it. You know who couldn't have done it? Carson Beck, because they wouldn't even let him play. And he's been on the team. So Stetson Bennett was the good for me. And another thing, BJ, I know listen, Jacksonville State, because you're doing it for something bigger than yourself. We always talking about, is college football or not, right? Well, it is. Jacksonville State is a team that I guarantee you Florida State is their barometer every single year because they put them on the schedule. And, they played them, I know we're going to get to the bad and to the ugly, but shout out to Jacksonville State, man, for finding a way to get it. Florida State don't understand how big of a brand they are, and Jacksonville State understands even when we beat big brands. I'm sorry, BJ, I didn't know that Jacksonville State wasn't in Alabama until you told me. I thought it was in Jacksonville. Like, that's a quick flight. No, that would be JU. Jacksonville State is in Alabama. So, sorry, But shout out to them Jacksonville State boys, but shout out to Stetson Bennett, and I do agree, BJ. Arkansas, they're always scratching and clawing, man. And they didn't beat Texas. They dominated Texas. It was Texas Longhorns. We're back. Oh, they got Steve Sarkisian. Who cares? You know, and for those who don't know, that is a long rivalry. I mean, Arkansas and Texas been playing each other for a long time. So shout out to them Razorbacks, man, for getting a big, dominant victory against them boys from Austin.
Yeah, definitely Arkansas, good win for them at the end of the day, beating their longtime big rival Texas right before Texas is, starting to think about coming into the SEC here. Arkansas gives them a dose of the reality. Say, hey, remember, we were picked 7th in the West. Welcome to the SEC. No, I thought that was a great win for Arkansas. Definitely the good from the weekend. Now to the bad. What was bad this weekend, BJ and Ben?
Yeah, I think I'm going to talk about Iowa State here. Iowa State, this was supposed to be their season, right? You had the momentum last year of going to the Fiesta Bowl, finishing in the top 10. Some of the polls, your preseason top 5, top 6. And this is a team that has not been a traditional power. Iowa State has had some good teams, but not a traditional power. This was going to be your year. This was going to be the season. Could you make a run at the college football playoff? Beat Oklahoma, you might be in the playoff. That's what everybody was saying. Well, you just lost at home by double digits to your arch rival in a game where you did not play well and Iowa controlled it. You lose by 10. Last year when you had the spotlight on you early, you lost to Louisiana at home. Now you lose to Iowa State by 10. A lot of guys who were going to play in the NFL on this team. Again, people thought this was your season, and in a rivalry series where you've been dominated by Iowa, that continued. No different. Iowa continues to have your number. You lose at home, double digits. You only had 3 points. I'm looking at that game going, when is Iowa State going to pick it up? And they weren't able to get it together. So I think the bad, given what the expectations were, I think I'm going with Iowa State.
Man, I mean, I hate to do this because I know. I really, really like this team, I like this coach. I got to go with Georgia Southern. I mean, it's not. I understand that, you had a lot of turmoil, in the offseason as far as who's going to be the quarterback. Tomlin, gets suspended for the first 2 games, not there, but it hasn't been close. You guys just haven't been themselves. Georgia Southern is known for really, really good defense and just giving you an offense that give you fits with that option, and they haven't been able to find that rhythm. I mean, BJ, this isn't the same Georgia Southern team as far as the players, but this is a team that went from double-digit losses to double-digit wins, and it's we've gotten so far away from that. A team that really, really trying to finally get over the hump, and try to be in a Sun Belt, a championship game. It's been very, very disappointing. I know that FAU is a good team, but are they that much better than Georgia Southern? So for me, it's Georgia Southern because I understand the expectations coming out of Statesboro. I understand how hard and how much pride those guys, take and something we ain't, talk about, BJ and Kevin. People talk about replacing the guy. You're replacing Shy Words. And we don't talk about how much he meant to that offense and to that team. People are, oh, man, no Shy Words, no problem. No, you got a big problem because he kept that team afloat. He kept it stable. So, for me, the bad for me is going to be Georgia Southern right now.
Yeah, the couple bad for me, I will say NC State. Bad, I wouldn't say it's totally ugly, but you are a team that is expected to be better. I don't know if people thought you were ready to contend with Clemson, but you were expected to be better. And you were not. You were not. Going to Starkville, looked like you didn't want to be there and played like it and didn't show up. They're a better team than that and just got taken to the house by Mississippi State there in Starkville. Another bad, and again, this will be a little different because they won, but I'll still put it in the bad category. Texas A&M. You go play a Colorado team, and again, maybe this is buffering the case that the Pac-12 was better than people think. But you go play a Colorado team that's picked down near the bottom of the Pac-12. You are a team that all offseason has been talked about. I think your head coach has even talked about you're ready to compete with Alabama. You want the big dog. And through 2 weeks, you have not looked great. Again, took a backup quarterback throwing a touchdown pass with about a minute to go for you to beat Colorado. And you put up 10 points. 10 points ain't going to get it done against Alabama. And again, I only put them in the bad because of what the preseason expectations for this team were going to be. And you struggled week 1 to kind of find yourself, get going. You finally did beat a lesser opponent. That's great. Neutral site in Denver against Colorado. It was not good for 58 minutes and some change all day long, especially offensively. So the bad for me, Texas A&M, even in a win, I feel like they kind of pulled it out rather than actually won that game there on Saturday. And now time for everybody's favorite part, just the absolute ugly. And there was plenty of that as well in college football.
I mean, of course, it's Florida State. Your first ever loss to an FCS school, to Jacksonville State. And again, Ben, to echo your sentiments, good for Jacksonville State. But what was going on the last play? I mean, how does that happen? That's like, a crazy clip you see from a high school game or something like that. They have to go 60 yards to beat you. It's 4th and 10 and there's 7 or 8 seconds left, and you're in like a regular defense. You're not in a prevent. And Mike Norvell came out and said, oh, well, they still had a timeout. So I guess the thought was, do they throw kind of the 15-yard crossing route, call the timeout, and then have a play from 35 yards out to try to win it, or a long field goal to try to tie it? But, okay, you can deal with that. You can't deal with one of the craziest finishes ever and them walking you off on a Hail Mary. I was describing it to somebody the other day or yesterday who didn't see it. And I said, yeah, it's like they threw a Hail Mary, but the Hail Mary was still 15 yards short of the end zone. And then when they caught it, the original defender got brushed off and the other defender ultimately got blocked. I mean, it was crazy. But I also want to say this. It was not just kind of one crazy sequence. I believe the first drive of the game, Florida State got the ball, had like a 4th and short at their own 35 and thought, okay, we'll go ahead, and didn't get it. And then if you go back to a couple of offensive drives before the finish from Jacksonville State, Florida State had a 3rd and goal from the 1-yard line, ended up getting 0 points. They got stuffed on 3rd and goal on a run, and then had an incomplete pass from Milton on 4th down. So Florida State got beat in this game, and there's a lot of room for improvement. I mean, I know some people have said, hey, you can only go up from here. Florida State, it was a really tough spot, and just that call defensively at the end of the game, just ugly.
Well, it got even uglier after the game. Offensive lineman for Florida State, Brady Scott, decided to propose to his girlfriend after the game while Jacksonville State is still proposing. I mean, and somebody says something to him about, his timing. He probably should have waited. He put, and I quote, "Love recognizes no barriers. It jumps hurdles, leaps fences, penetrates walls to arrive at its destination full of hope. In that case, it certainly doesn't care about a loss in a college football game." Brady, let me help you understand something. You are only known for what you do and where you do it at. I understand. You want to make this a moment. And for those people going back to when Boise State beat Oklahoma, Ian Johnson, they won the game. They won the game, and he went up to the cheerleader. Brady, you only get so many opportunities to make a mark in college. You will be known for this forever. I get it. You telling your friends, hey, fella, listen, after we win.
He's the love of his life.
After we win, I'm going to ask him. They said, well, what if we lose? I'm still going to ask him, Brady, listen to me. You had all week to do this, and you're going to wait, till after the game. Look, listen, I understand, he wanted to make it a moment, and love does conquer all, I'm just saying. But love don't love nobody either. Isn't that a song? I'm just saying, Brady, I'm just saying, there are times to do things, there are times not to do it. But look, she obviously said yes, but BJ and Kevin, there is a time and a place for everything. Well, you were here to learn football, and you have not. I'm going to ask her right now, Brady, don't do it. You're my heart. Well, and Jacksonville is going, why they planting the feet?
Well, I mean, at this point, if you had to wait for a Florida State win to do it, he might not get engaged. So, I mean, that's. Do you want to get engaged or you not want to get engaged?
I mean, probably just do it on a Wednesday or a Thursday or something like that. I mean, at this
point, I get it. You want to do it on the field, but like that literally couldn't have been worse. And I know it's like, hey, she's the love of my life. That's terrific. I appreciate that. But like, it was like the signature loss I know in the last little bit, there's been many, but the signature loss in Tallahassee the last couple of years, and probably not the best time to do that. But again, you can always say we got engaged at Bobby Bowden Field and Doak Campbell Stadium. What was that like? Oh, we just got beat by an FCF school, and they were planting the flag out on the Seminole at midfield, but it was a special moment. No, I get it. At the end of the day, they'll remember love wins over everything, even if the Seminoles didn't win at the end of the day. But that was kind of unique timing, as Ben said. That's the good, the bad, and certainly the ugly. Oh, I didn't say the ugly easy. Probably do this every week. Kansas football, my goodness. You've lost. Look, seriously, You lost to Coastal Carolina 3 times in a row. This a week after you tore the goalpost down because you won a game. Not because it was like a great opponent. You won a game and went berserk, and then you lose to Coastal Carolina. You are totally ugly, Jayhawks. The end. We'll come back. We've got more to come. We'll look at the whole week that was in the SEC. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Great to be here on this Monday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben here on 3 and Out. We'll chat with Matt Smith, southernpigskin.com. We'll talk some SEC football with him the week that was, the week that's set to coming up in just a little bit. But what a week it was. Arkansas steals the show, I think, in a big way. BJ and Ben in the SEC this week, beating Texas, soon to be member of the SEC, and really laying it on them. Like 300 yards rushing. That is just a straight beatdown when you talk about physical football and what they were able to do with that Texas football program. 300 yards on the ground, dominating play. And I know Georgia kind of dominated against UAB, but that's certainly the highlight of the weekend from the SEC. Is Arkansas, a team picked near the bottom of your conference, just blasted a top 15 team.
Yeah, and it was the welcome to the SEC. Okay, this is what you guys want. Here you go. And Sam Pittman's done a great job. Did a good job last year. Had Arkansas kind of playing above what the expectations were. And then you couple the opener where they look good with what happened against Texas. Spectacular around the program is very real. The energy is very real, and ran the football really well. You had over 300 yards rushing, I think 4 touchdowns, and then we know all the names defensively. I mean, Grant Morgan and Bumper Poole and Jalen Catalon were out there making plays. It was really, really good to see Arkansas have such a signature win, but also just kind of have that atmosphere, have that momentum, and that's going to be a big, big challenge, for Georgia Southern, needless to say, on Saturday. But then you also mentioned Georgia. I mean, Ben, you're right. Stetson Bennett was good. I mean, he was more than good. He was great. Deserves his own segment with what he did. I mean, to come in and have 270 yards passing and 5 touchdowns in the first half, tying a single game school record for touchdown passes, he was exceptional. And I thought you made a great point earlier when talking about Stetson Bennett. He's always there for Georgia. Georgia needs him. He's there. Comes in against Arkansas in week 1 last year, has the start against Auburn, was tremendous. And people will say guys are wide open. That's fine. Throwing the ball to those guys and setting records in the first half. And again, did some research on the Sports Reference database. I believe Stetson Bennett is the first quarterback this millennium with 5 touchdown passes on 12 or fewer throws in a single game. So the efficiency was off the charts. His attitude, his preparation, his work ethic, his talent was really great to see. And Stetson Bennett finished his high school career at Pierce County in the top 10 for career passing yards and career passing touchdowns in the state of Georgia. This young man can play, and he absolutely showed it on Saturday. But Jay, think about the SEC. Arkansas, what a game, and Stetson Bennett, what a performance.
Shout out to Sam Pittman in Arkansas. I mean, when you think about going into this game, Kevin, we were saying, man, giving NC State, a lot of credit because of what they did week 1. But Sam Pittman understands that for them to try to get to that magic number 6, they're gonna have to win some of these out of conference games. But they had their way against NC State. Arkansas, and I think sometimes when you start talking about Kevin and BJ, like you start talking about some of these teams, we forget. A team that we ain't talking about, and I know the competition wasn't that. Auburn has scored 60 points in 2 weeks. Both games, they scored 60. That's building confidence moving forward. That's what they're going to need with the schedule only getting rougher with A&M and LSU and Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Auburn. With Alabama coming to town. But I give Kentucky a lot of credit. I mean, BJ, right now, Will Levis is trying to have one of those Drew Lock type years through the air. And I know that we got to get out of this because of who it is and where they do it at. No, Stetson Bennett, he did his thing at Georgia. Will Levis is doing his thing right now for a Kentucky team that's got a passing game to go along with the run game, to go along with the defense. And my Gators, they got to go to Kentucky. I don't like the fact that they're going to have to defend the pass for real. But, I know that with Florida right now, it's all about who's going to be the quarterback, which I definitely think is going to be Emory Jones moving forward. But Anthony Richardson, Mr. AR-15 himself, is definitely not making it. If my mama had her pick, it would be Anthony Richardson right now. But I think the SEC, they didn't. LSU got back to their winning ways. Colorado State is bad. You know how I know? Because they lost to Vanderbilt. They lost to Vanderbilt this weekend. Vanderbilt got in the win column. So, the state of Colorado, really didn't live up to the standard this weekend. But yeah, I think BJ, Kevin, it goes back to, Arkansas, Tennessee, Stetson Bennett, and what Kentucky is doing right now. But all them Auburn boys are building confidence scoring over 60 in 2 straight weeks.
And they got Penn State this week. Speak to that, BJ. We did see a conference game this week, Kentucky and Mizzou. What did we kind of learn there about the Wildcats?
I think Ben was spot on. This is a team with balance. This is a team with confidence. This is a team to keep an eye on. And I picked Missouri in that game. I thought Missouri might be a step ahead of Kentucky this season, and that is not the case. Kentucky has shown that they are a team that should have Florida's attention. They should have Georgia's attention right now with what they're doing. And you mentioned Levis, Ben, has been, really a productive player. Their running back, Chris Rodriguez, I know you're a couple of years removed from Benny Snell setting records for Kentucky. Chris Rodriguez is a superstar at running back. He had over 200 yards rushing and 3 rushing touchdowns against a dominant Missouri defensive line. And oh, by the way, he had a receiving touchdown as well. So you talk about a spotlight game. Mr. Rodriguez went for 200 on the ground and scored 4 touchdowns. So, Ben, I'm with you, man. I think Kentucky's a team to keep an eye on. Stoops has done a great job there, not only getting a couple of teams that have been on a national level, but elevating the status quo of the program, making Kentucky to where year to year they're a team to be aware of and to watch out for in the SEC. Kentucky, really impressive statement over the weekend.
We'll come back. We'll chat more SEC football with Matt Smith, southernpigskin.com. Look at the weekend that was and how we can play it forward here into week 3 of the college football season. It's 3 and out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Always a wild weekend in the SEC, and this coming up, we expect no different. Going to be a tremendous weekend of SEC football. Our next guest, good friend of the show from SouthernPigskin.com, Matt Smith, joins us. Matt, welcome. How are you?
Hey, guys. Well, better than Clay Helton, that's for sure.
Yeah, wow. Yes, absolutely. We'll get to that in just a minute. But in the SEC, Matt, Arkansas, game of the week. A team picked near the bottom of the SEC West just rips a number 15 team in Texas.
Very impressive. And I'm sure I've said it many times over just how much I love that staff, how well they have those guys prepared every week, even going back to last year. They were clearly overmatched from a talent perspective, but hung in there with Georgia, should have beaten Auburn, should have beaten LSU, beat Mississippi State, beat Ole Miss, just how week in and week out they show up to play, they maximize their abilities. And I thought they did it again, even at a whole different level on Saturday night, dominating the line of scrimmage. Kendall Briles putting KJ Jefferson in winning positions where he could take a quick read. If not, let the ball in and run. And that defense, again, just totally overwhelming the Longhorns up front, something we've seen way too much from Texas. But awesome atmosphere. Great seeing Arkansas fans fired up after the couple seasons they had back in 2018 and 2019. And I did think they'd win the game, but no one saw that 40-14, 40-21 type dominance coming from the Hogs. But between that and the effort from Mississippi State against NC State, that SEC West right now, it is loaded. And I don't know what to think if you're ranking teams 2-7. It's kind of all over the map right now.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about Mississippi State because, like Arkansas, from the outside looking in, kind of modest at best expectations. And I, for one, Matt, I thought NC State, and still can bounce back, but I thought NC State was going to be really, really good, a top 25 type team. And Mississippi State had a really interesting opener, could have lost that game easily to Louisiana Tech. What was the difference for them? I know opened the game with a 100-yard kickoff return for a touchdown, and how big of a win can that be for Mississippi State moving forward?
Yeah, well, that was my first point. BJ special teams has probably saved them, certainly sparking their rally against Louisiana Tech with a long kick return and then the opening kickoff this week. But yeah, and for all the praise I give Barry Odom at Arkansas, I probably should do the same for Zach Arnett at Mississippi State. That's a tough gig, being a defensive coordinator for Mike Leach, and I thought he figured it out pretty well last year. And for at least the last 6 quarters or so of football, he's done a really nice job shutting down that NC State running game, who I thought looked really good in week 1, has 2 really good backs. And, I know Dave Doran's history of playing on the road in big games, and I overlooked it and thought NC State would win, and he Dave Doran that one pretty hard. So, yeah, I think they're a very interesting couple of games the next 2 weeks, going to Memphis and then LSU for their SEC opener back in Starkville the next 2 weeks. We'll learn a lot about the Bulldogs. If they can win at least one of those, 3-1, it's probably better than I thought they'd be coming out of September. But yeah, like I said earlier, this SEC West beyond Alabama, seeing how LSU and A&M have looked coming back to the pack. Auburn, we'll find out on Saturday night. It's wild. We're going to see a lot of good competitive games in the SEC West this season. I'm looking forward to pretty much all of them.
Man, do you think Emory Jones is feeling the pressure of having a guy like Anthony Richardson playing as well as he does? And how dangerous do you think Kentucky going to be with a guy in Will Levis who, surprise, surprise, they got a passing game to go with that running game?
So, yeah, maybe we needed to pump the brakes a bit on Will Levis after week 1, but I thought Kentucky going back to kind of their mashed potatoes, their running game this week, really shined. But having Will Levis as that gravy on top of that they never had in the past with Terry Wilson, with Steven Johnson, whoever Mark Stoops has really had under center, but he added that element. They're able to hit at least a couple explosive plays in the passing game. And when you run the ball as well as Kentucky normally does, and as well as they did on Saturday night against Missouri, it's really all you need to possibly elevate this team from the standard 7-5 Kentucky teams we tend to see every year to one who I think does have a legit shot to finish second in the SEC East now, winning that big swing game. And now they can probably point ahead to being 4-0 when Florida comes to town in a couple of weeks. And yet, yeah, as for the Gators, this is a fascinating week for Dan Mullen. I can't wait to see what he does. Hopefully Anthony Richardson is healthy enough to really force him to make that decision. Does he play both guys? Does he stick with the guy who probably still has the locker room in Emory Jones? Or does he go with the guy who's looked better on the field the past 2 weeks? So a fascinating week for Dan Mullen here. Obviously the ultimate test in this Alabama defense. I don't really think it matters for this week per se. That Florida schedule is about to get really fun coming up in October with Kentucky, with LSU, with Georgia. So if he does think Richardson is the guy going forward, I would not hesitate to have him make his first start against Alabama. It's going to be tough. And I don't think he should be hesitant to do that regardless. Take your lumps. It's probably not going to be a good day, but I think that'll pay dividends if he is the guy, again, coming up with all those big swing games the Gators have in October. They got to get this figured out. I just don't think the two quarterback stuff is going to work long term. So let's try and settle this in the next 2 weeks and get ready to go when that schedule cranks up in October.
Matt Smith, southernpigskin.com, our guest here on 3 and Out. And Matt, Georgia has looked really, really good the first 2 weeks. Defense has not allowed a score. Their offense gave a pick 6 last week. So technically Georgia's defense with their pick 6 against Clemson outscoring Georgia's offense. Potentially their defense is held points to less. Where is the ceiling for this Georgia defense? Obviously giving up nothing every week. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I mean, where is this in terms of some of the, at least the start all-time defenses we've seen here?
Yeah, 2011 Alabama. I could see it being right up there with them in terms of some of the stats, especially looking at the schedule and some of the quarterbacks they have coming up. You know, not an overwhelming slate of quarterbacks here on this Georgia schedule the rest of the way. So they played probably the best one they'll see back in week 1 and handled him and allowed 3 points to that Clemson offense. So, yeah, I mean, another dynamic performance. UAB certainly overmatched, but I think by the time we get into November and you want to start making those historical comparisons, Kevin, to me, I start with 2011 Alabama. That's the gold standard for me, at least in the last 20 years or so, since the spread era, at least of college football has really taken off. What that unit did week in and week out, I think this group is just as talented. I think it'll be just as productive, and obviously should be an easy win the next couple of weeks here with South Carolina and Vanderbilt, but some decent offenses coming up in October. We'll see with what Auburn puts together. Again, we'll learn a lot more about them this week. As I said, there's at least some sort of explosiveness now at Kentucky. Then, of course, Florida. November, it gets pretty easy as well, but I think October will be the test for if this Georgia defense is holding these teams to 7, 10, 13 points. Then we're talking about a historically great unit. And so far from what I've seen in 120 minutes, this group can absolutely be that.
Sticking with the Dogs, how nice is it for Georgia to have a quarterback like Stetson Bennett, a player like Stetson Bennett on the roster where you need him? Had some good moments last year, but on Saturday he comes out and, ties a school record in the first half with 5 touchdown passes.
Yeah, I mean, at limited times last year, I thought he played really well. Obviously, the first half started out well against Alabama, played pretty well early against Florida, but when he needed to elevate his game to go toe-to-toe with Kyle Trask and with Mac Jones, he couldn't quite do it. And that's probably the fear if you're pointing way far down the road. We're 3 months out from Georgia potentially having to play Alabama, but even if you want to look at Florida as a losable game, between then and that, I don't see much of a reason why Georgia can't keep rolling with Bennett. He's a capable quarterback, does have a low ceiling compared to JT Daniels, but if that injury is going to linger, I would be very careful with Daniels. I would not rush him back, even for games like Arkansas and Auburn. I think we've seen enough from Bennett to know with that defense, he's not going to lose you the game himself, and they should be fine there. So, yeah, great day for Bennett. Good to see that performance. Stated to see that with Daniels, a guy who's been injury-plagued throughout his career quite a bit now. Before Bennett, who lost his job to stick around and kind of being even the number 3 guy we thought going into the season. That was a really good performance for him, even if it was against UAB. So good for him. Kudos there.
And man, I mean, obviously it's great to have a guy like a Stetson Bennett, as BJ mentioned, a guy that, he doesn't really make no waves, just goes out there and handles his business. But when you think about what Georgia wants to do postseason wise, I mean, JT Daniels was injured, coming into Georgia. Obviously, he's hit the injury bug again. Is this team or is this defense the team good enough to surround, Stetson Bennett if and when he do have to play Alabama or meet Alabama in Atlanta?
I'm still skeptical of that. I just think teams, when they have that much imbalance, and this Georgia offense can evolve if it gets some guys healthy, even with Bennett, but I just worry about teams when there's that much imbalance between the offense and the defense to keep delivering that performance week after week, like they'd have to do 3 times, presumably against Alabama and then in 2 playoff games to accomplish all that. So again, we haven't necessarily seen it from Daniels. It looks like he had a higher ceiling. He displayed it at times last year. But they're going to need some help from the receivers as well. Running game looks solid, but until we have that full complement of receivers back, doesn't necessarily need George Pickens. But just some of the guys have been banged up going back to last year. Once all those guys are healthy, I think we'll have a good sense of what this offense can be. And for now, I do think they'll need Daniels to be able to win that first national title in 40 years. But again, we've seen limited offenses win national titles. They're usually coached by Nick Saban, going back to 2011 Alabama. But I'd be skeptical to say this streak can end for Georgia with Bennett. I do think Daniels in that arm strength and needing to stretch the field to beat a defense like Alabama's is probably going to be necessary if the Dogs can pull it, if the Dogs are going to pull this off this year.
Matt Smith, SouthernPigskin.com, joining us here on 3 and Out. And Matt, Auburn, a prove it weekend, 2-0. They've looked the part the first 2 weeks with Brian Harsin, but you go to Happy Valley, understand it's going to be a whiteout there, a night game. What are you looking for out of Auburn taking that road trip up there to Pennsylvania to play the Nittany Lions?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much the only team in the league that really hasn't been tested. I think we have a good sense of kind of what everyone else is based on playing a peer team, another Power 5 team. We've just seen Auburn, play 2 tomato cans, score 60 points. And I have no idea if they're legit and could even be the second best team in the West, or if they are kind of the 6-6, 7-5 team that we thought they were. So yeah, this matchup is really fascinating. I've been pointing to it all summer. Again, what I like about Brian Harsin is that he's not going to come in with his system and just take his lumps and get the right players for what he wants to do. He's going to take the players he has, and he's going to figure out the best way to use them. That's what he did at Boise. He had to be a run-heavy offense one year. He did that. If it was going to be a pass-heavy offense the next year because he had a better quarterback, he did that. And this Auburn running game looks really good with Tank Bigsby, with a young guy like Jarquez Hunter emerging. You have a veteran quarterback in Bo Nix who's played in Kyle Field, in Bryant-Denny Stadium, in the Swamp. I don't think he's going to be intimidated. That's as unique of an atmosphere as there is in college football, though, at night at State College. But again, I think that experience of Nix, packing your running game on the road, hard to really comment on the defense. Again, not playing anybody yet, but I'm fascinated by that matchup. But I'm kind of bullish on Auburn this week, again, just because of that experience and because of that running game, pretty solid offensive line. I think they can capitalize on some opportunities that Wisconsin failed to do a couple weeks back in their close loss to Penn State. So, yeah, game of the week for me. Again, I just don't think Florida can hang around enough for that game to be competitive into the second half. So, must-see game for me this week is going to be that one Saturday night up in Happy Valley.
Matt, finally wanted to ask you about your alma mater, Notre Dame. That Florida State game was tight. Obviously, that win looks a lot different now. Even if there were concerns, Florida State losing to Jacksonville State, and then Notre Dame wins. You're 2-0, but you have to come back or finish off Toledo. I mean, is this a potential national contender if they put it all together, or is Notre Dame maybe a little overrated at this point?
Yeah, I think they're going to be an entertaining product from week to week. I think they've really stabilized over the past couple of years, particularly defensively under Clark Lee, but this is a much different defense. They're going to be more aggressive, probably get more sacks, get more turnovers, but that comes with allowing a lot more chunk plays, and we've seen them get burnt in each of the last 2 games. So I just think this team from week to week, it would not surprise me if they play Cincinnati in a couple of weeks, if they win that game by 3 touchdowns, turn around and go into Blacksburg at night and are just a complete mess and lose that game by 3 touchdowns. I think that's going to be that kind of year for Notre Dame. Again, an entertaining product. I thought last year at times they were pretty boring for the most part, squeaked out a win against Louisville, just kind of, would put everything, get an early lead and then kind of shut it down, use their running game. That's not this Notre Dame team. They're going to allow a lot of explosive plays, probably create a lot more explosive plays because they can't rely on that running game so much. So that stretch they have coming up here, Wisconsin, Cincinnati, Virginia Tech, USC, Carolina, that's just going to be fun football. They're not going to win all of them. They'll probably lose at least 1, more likely than not 2. Still a capable team, I think, who could beat anybody outside of maybe Alabama or Georgia in the country. But again, if they lose to Purdue this week, that wouldn't shock me either. So for what Notre Dame's been the last couple of years, I think they've moved into a kind of a high ceiling, low floor type of team where you just don't know what you're going to get from one week to the next.
Matt Smith, SouthernPigskin.com. Our guest, Matt, you mentioned it at the beginning. So 30 seconds before we let you go. Clay Helton out at Southern Cal, fired here after 2 ball games. Should there be some SEC fan bases worried that their head coach might be getting a phone call from the Trojans?
Yeah, well, Ole Miss fans are perpetually worried because they're Ole Miss fans, and that's just the way they're raised to be. So I get the natural worry there. I don't think they have anything to worry about, but you never know, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's at least a phone call made there to Mr. Kiffin. But in terms of realistic candidates, I think Mario Cristobal stirred himself well this weekend, make a call up there. I'm sure James Franklin's name will be mentioned. Maybe a fallback, a guy like Jay Norvell, who's doing really good things at Nevada. So interesting to see how it all plays out. But if you're talking about Ole Miss fans, I think they'll be okay. But because of who they are and the history of Ole Miss football, I'm sure they're a little bit terrified here today that is now open.
Matt Smith, always a pleasure, man. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.
See you, boys. Thanks.
Appreciate it. Matt Smith, southernpigskin.com. We'll come back with more 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you here on this Monday, Kevin, BJ, and Ben. Again, yes, that breaking news. We talked about it with Matt Smith there at the end. 2 games into the season, and Clay Helton is done at Southern Cal. BJ and Ben, we talked about that. Obviously, Lane Kiffin with ties to that. But where do you think, and we got about 2 minutes left or so here, where do you think Southern Cal is right now in terms of a job, a gig? I know people say, well, it's Los Angeles. Oh, okay. In terms of getting it done, they've run through their share of coaches the last handful of years. They are obviously looking up at Stanford, who they just lost to. Obviously, Oregon doing what they're doing. I mean, where do you see this Southern Cal job right now that used to be one of the kind of crown jewel gigs of college football?
I still think it is. I still think it's a tier 1 job, and I think there's room for immediate success, right? Like the Pac-12 has your Oregons, and you've seen Washington make a run, but for the most part, there's not this 3 or 4 team sort of dominance at the top where you don't feel like you can move up, contend for championships. But you're one of the iconic names in the history of college football. That doesn't change because you have a few bad years or even a couple of decades, since Pete Carroll. That doesn't change. And California high school football is elite. You're right there in LA. You think about an era of name, image, likeness. I mean, you have a brand as big as just about anybody. I still think it's a top job, and I think they will have, very high profile candidates.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, every assistant coach wants to have an opportunity to be a head coach. USC is still one of the premier schools. That Kevin, something you said, you in the Pac-12, that's really trying to figure out who's their alpha dog right now with UCLA playing better and Oregon playing better. I think if you get the right guy in there, they can start winning immediately.
Again, going to be interesting to see what happens and who are some of the names that come out for that job. And you think about some of the names that we would normally mention. It's like, would you mention a Jimbo Fisher and some of those guys, a Brian? I mean, these are guys that are already at kind of top-notch jobs already, BJ. So I'm kind of interested to see what it's going to be.
Yeah, and Matt mentioned Mario Cristobal at Oregon, has had a lot of success, potentially a name to watch there. It seems like James Franklin whenever there's an opening. But I think some of the names Matt mentioned wouldn't surprise me if Cristobal is a top candidate.
Again, appreciate Matt Smith joining us here in the final hour of the program. Also, Brooks Austin, Dogs Daily on SI, for joining us here on the show as well. If you missed any portion of the show, ESPNCoastal.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, go to our YouTube page, and you can get a podcasted version of the show each day. We'll see you tomorrow right here on 3 and Out.